The U.S. real estate industry is in for some rough times, according to billionaire investor Charlie Munger. Unlike most people who make forecasts like this, Munger is knowledgeable about the subject. Charlie was a real estate investor before becoming well known as Warren Buffett's right-hand man and the vice president of Berkshire Hathaway. In fact, Munger continues to make real estate investments today. I paid attention when Munger cautioned about the current situation of the real estate market in a recent interview with the Financial Times, since one of the companies he invests in is one of the major owners of apartment buildings in Southern California. Beyond real estate, the repercussions of which will be felt greatly will have a significant impact on the entire economy. In his own words, the real estate industry is currently experiencing a great deal of grief and pain, and things are just about to get worse. To illustrate what Munger is getting at, consider the following short anecdote. Recently, Gagavelli was the subject of an investigation by the Wall Street Journal. Gagavelli is considered to be a syndicator of real estate. His business strategy is straightforward. He collects funds from wealthy or upper middle class people. Then a piece of real estate is purchased using that sum of money. The syndicator then keeps a sizable portion of the property's earnings, which enables him to benefit without using any of his own money. The tale of Gagavelli serves as an example of what has been occurring in the real estate market lately. Gagavelli was simply another mid-level IT employee before he began his real estate profession. However, his company controlled residential complexes with more than 7,000 units valued at more than $500 million last year. Given that Houston, Texas is the fourth largest city in the United States, he was even one of the biggest landlords there. On the surface, Gagavelli's investing plan appeared to be very easy to understand. He would borrow money from the bank and combine it with money from investors to purchase what are known as distressed properties. These are buildings with numerous vacant units that require extensive repairs to raise rental rates to levels competitive with the market today. The technique appeared to be low risk, but there was a significant problem: rising interest rates. These properties weren't bought using conventional mortgages like people did when buying homes in the U.S. With a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage, you can buy a home. These fixed-rate mortgages lock in your interest rate, which means it won't change throughout the term of the loan. But instead, so-called bridging loans were used to buy these apartment buildings. Bridge loans are designed to be used for the brief period of time that the apartment building is being refurbished and rents are being raised. They are short-term in nature. The so-called fluctuating interest rate that these bridge loans have is a feature that makes them extremely risky. With floating rate debt, the interest rate fluctuates depending on the current rate, which can result in significant swings in how much the owner of the apartment building must pay each month to pay off his debt. This is in contrast to traditional fixed-rate debt, where the interest rate remains the same for the duration of the loan. Here are some figures to consider. Let's imagine one of these real estate syndicators obtains a $30 million bridge loan at a 2% interest rate to purchase a sizable apartment complex. As a result, the owner would need to pay interest on an interest-only loan of $600,000 every year to be current. His annual interest payment rises by a factor of 4, reaching $2.4 million if the interest rate soars to 8%. Imagine the effects on the typical American if their mortgage payment increased 4 times in a short period of time. They would immediately experience financial difficulty. Going back to our tale of Gagavelli, he regrettably purchased buildings with floating rate debt, which was bad news for him and his investors. Real estate syndicators that buy property with floating rate loans aren't much better off. The Wall Street Journal claims that in April 2023, 4 of his apartment buildings totaling 3,000 units went into foreclosure, wiping out the investors who had purchased them. Since the Great Financial Crisis, this has been one of the biggest commercial real estate crashes. The term syndicor refers to the hundreds of real estate business owners in the United States, many of whom have experienced comparable financial strains and have acquired properties they can no longer pay. Charlie Munger is only one of them. Defaults have been uncommon thus far, but according to Charlie Munger, it's just a matter of time before things get worse. He stated, "A lot of real estate isn't that great anymore. Numerous shopping malls, office complexes, and other structures are problematic. There is a lot of suffering in the world. Beyond simply investors, the pain caused by what is happening in the real estate market is widespread. Banks will also be severely impacted." In an interview with the Financial Times, Munger claimed that banks are flooded with these subpar loans for commercial real estate. Nearly all of the main banks considerably reduced their lending to the real estate industry in recent years. There were smaller local banks and credit unions to fill the need. These smaller lenders are currently responsible for the majority of lending in the real estate sector, and they will be left with the bill when it comes time to foreclose on these properties. Banks are in the business of lending money, to put it simply, aiming to profit from the difference between what they pay their depositors and what they gain from lending the money out. They take in money in the form of deposits and then turn around and lend that money to people and businesses. A bank's business model does, however, rest on the basic premise that the borrowers of the money they lend would in fact repay it. If not, the lending bank will have to bear the loss. You must comprehend the idea of a capital stack in order to comprehend who lost money as a result of the transaction. A capital stack demonstrates the combination of debt and equity used to pay for an acquisition. In contrast to debt, which the owners borrow from a lender and are legally compelled to repay, equity refers to the funds that the owners contributed to help finance the transaction. In the event of bankruptcy or foreclosure, those at the bottom of the capital stack would be required to make repayments first. This dynamic means that the lower on the capital stack you are, the less risk you're incurring, as they take the least risk and hence get the lowest return. Banks are virtually always at the bottom of the capital stack. Equity investors, on the other hand, are at the top of the capital stack and are taking on more risk. As a result, they need to obtain a higher theoretical return in order to be willing to take on that greater level of risk. The most straightforward illustration of this capital stack idea is someone purchasing a home. For example, if John spends $20,000 down on a $100,000 house, that $20,000 is the equity element of the capital stack for that purchase. The remaining funds required to buy the house are borrowed from a lender. John visits his neighborhood bank to apply for a loan, and the bank approves him for a loan for the final $80,000 required for the purchase. Now that John has the whole $100,000, he can purchase the house. Examining the capital stack for this transaction, let's see. Equity contributed 20% and debt contributed 80% to the cost of this purchase. In the capital stack, John's equity is positioned on top of the bank's debt. The bank's debt is senior to John's equity in terms of investing. This implies that if something goes wrong, the bank must be fully reimbursed before John earns even a cent. Let's use an analogy with two empty glasses and a pitcher of water to illustrate this. The water in the left glass symbolizes the debt owing to the bank, while the water in the right glass symbolizes John's equity. The bank's glass must be fully filled before John's equity glass may receive even a single drop of water if he doesn't make payments. John's equity glass will be dry if there isn't enough water to fill the bank's glass to the brim. Let's support this hypothetical case with some figures. In the event that the house is sold for $90,000, the first $80,000 will be paid to the bank to make them whole, and the remaining $10,000 will go to John. Just enough money would be left over when the house is sold for $80,000 to fully repay the bank. However, John would be left with nothing. But what occurs if things actually go south? What if the housing market collapses and the house John purchased for $100,000 is now only worth $50,000? The bank situation begins to deteriorate at this point. The bank suffers a huge loss. For instance, a loss of $30,000 represents about 40% of the loan's total amount. For a bank of any size, this $30,000 loss is a drop in the ocean. However, once you enter the realm of commercial real estate, the numbers grow enormous and get big very rapidly. It only takes a few of these kinds of losses for the regional and community banks that have grown to dominate the real estate lending market to begin to feel the pinch. Even if the loss was a $30,000 loss on a small single-family home rather than a $30 million loss on a small single-family home rather than a $30 million loss on foreclosure of a sizable apartment complex or office building. Beyond Wall Street, the repercussions from banks losing money will have reverberations. Banks outside of the top 25 largest in the nation own nearly 70% of all real estate loans. Morgan Chase or Bank of America won't be negatively impacted by what's happening in the commercial real estate market. So, the vitality of American communities and towns will instead be derived from their regional community banks. The economic growth of the areas in which these banks operate depends utterly on them. When banks incur losses, it reduces their capacity and desire to make loans, which has an impact on the entire economy. Imagine a small business owner in your community who runs a pizzeria on Main Street, for instance. The owner wants to open a second location as a result of the location's success. The business owner requires a loan from a bank, probably a local bank or credit union, to open the second site. Many parties stand to gain if the loan application for the business owner is approved, including new employees who will be hired at the second location. Numerous new jobs will be created in the local economy as a result of this new pizza restaurant launching. Plumbers, electricians, painters, and handymen are just a few of the contractors that will be paid to make repairs to the structure in order to get it ready for the grand opening. All of those people will have additional job as a result of this facility opening, and it won't only be blue-collar workers who will profit. The opening of this facility will boost revenue for white-collar occupations, including real estate brokers, attorneys, and accountants. Then there are all the manufacturers of the modern furnishings such as pizza ovens, pots, pans, silverware, tables, and chairs that will be employed in the new restaurant. The restaurant's equipment would be provided by businesses all across the world. The point is that this restaurant opening will have a significant beneficial impact on the economy, despite the long list. But what if the neighborhood bank rejects the loan? They reject the loan not because they don't trust the entrepreneur or the company, but rather because it suffered large losses as a result of subpar real estate loans. Everyone and every company who anticipated profiting from the restaurant opening has lost out. Although this is plainly a hypothetical example, there are thousands of actual instances that are quite similar to this that occur every day in the United States. This demonstrates how problems in the real estate sector can have a ripple effect on the economy as a whole. If we observe this dynamic in action across the United States, only time will tell. There you have it then. Much appreciation for your attendance. By studying the greatest investors in the world, I hope to improve you as an investor, so be sure to click that subscribe button. I'll talk to you soon.